Here I am with Happiiaka, the Element 2 caster. Hopefully, soon to be a little bit more than that. We'll see. Or Element 3 caster. We'll add a third one to it. We'll make it Element 3. We can
Yeah,
only assume. We can only assume.
I casted Element 2. That's what I've
Yes.
done. We can say that.
Yes.
What I will do, who knows?
No. What's next? Nobody knows. But here we are, Happiiaka, back at it for another Constitution of Siege, and to do the little song and dance. This is the Constitution of Siege. Is me just asking various people what they think the most like siege or iconic play is and why they think that is. It is not necessarily tied to Pro League, although a lot of people, and especially just because this is where I'm at, this is my sphere, it has a Pro League tilt, but like it's not necessary. It's not required.
You
Uh,
also ask the casters who watch
I
the
have
esport.
also been
No.
asking a lot of people who are very much in that pro league circuit. So we will not see the Macy J year one post play. Like it's just not happening. I'll keep my hope. I'll keep my hope up, but it's unlikely. Anyways, so Happy, what is your defining play for Siege?
So for me, in terms of like what really defines Siege, right? I think it makes sense for me to go with something more recent because I had like on and off watched a lot. I watched a ton through like years 2 to 4, and I remembered a lot that like that personally stuck with me, right? Like as an APAC fan,
Yeah,
remembering rounds like when Fnatic all hot breached top floor consulate against BDS, something like that sticks with me personally. I was a big reciprocity fan, so Laxing sitting out on tarp and securing them a spot in the semifinals in that one invitational, that stuck with me. But that isn't like the most siege play. So
well,
I wanted to go with something.
Laxing lurking on some fuck ass angle that you shouldn't even be able to get to.
That's just
You
like
can make
that's
the argument, yeah.
that is true, honestly. I didn't think of it like that. That is a good example. But in terms of like what I was thinking, I wanted something where I could watch it, and even as someone who like wasn't really biased in the situation, I was just so moved by the moment. And part of that is like, if it's an esports thing, if there's a crowd reaction, how much hype was there generated around certain things happening at certain times?
Yeah.
I think it's like just generally like something that I will remember for a long time. And also it shows how Siege kind of evolves, and something that I think does that really well in terms of just like doing all that, but also like the thing I really want to consider important for me as well is that at the end of the day, Siege is still a first person shooter. The
Yeah.
most Siege things are all like the util usage, and I know Lynx did the GK
Hashola,
play, the
Azami, yeah.
Hashom play, yeah, the Azami play, that was sick, and that's very Siege in its own way. But for me, I kind of like to focus on like how is it like you can put all of the util, like use everything you possibly can. You dot all the I's, cross all the T's. On paper, you did nothing wrong, and you still lose because at the end of the day, it's like that's just siege to me. That can happen because you can
Yeah.
do everything right, and the other person can still just be better than you sometimes. And for me, the most influenced, the coolest play I've ever seen was KZ in the grand finals. I believe it was round 10.
With the one and only Nitrosol that they had in the back pocket, it gets rid of Fiddiking. Now the push from side. Before our very eyes, we may witness something very special.
He was roaming upstairs on labs, and their like FaZe have done a full roam clear. They've cleared everything else. They just have him stuck there. They have like no more drones, and they might have used a lot of util already, or they're trying to save more for the execute. But they like, so they're lacking some info, but they have 3 people on 3 different angles basically all watching him, and he pops up and still kills 2 of them anyways and basically wins them the round in that moment.
At this point now, W7M, you do not need to peak. 20 seconds, time arguably on the side of W7M. Candela thrown, entry has been made, but Valipox gets on the flank. Souls though, now tries to respond, can't find the headshot, doesn't even get the down. Valipox stays alive, at least enough to deny in terms of time, of which is running out for Souls. He has to stick to plan. We know he cannot. We know we get another round. 6-4. 2 more rounds.
To me, that's so quintessentially like that's siege, right? You do everything right, you have the perfect roam clear, and then someone just pops up and makes the most outstanding play and kills 2 of you in one fell swoop, and all of a sudden, like it
Yeah.
feels like the round's just like irrecoverable. Like that's
That
just
is
it's so like, because at the end of the day, right, it's still a first person shooter. And I think it kind of shows the evolution of the game, right? Because for a while people did see it as like okay, let's see how we can like plant this, let's see how we can play around this post plant and like strategically, and people still do that for sure.
Yeah.
But it's kind of been less and less popular. You need to take more and more map control because you're worried more and more about the individuals on the other side. Defenses have started to spread out more and more away from the site, right? Like top floor defenses on border, you're holding everything on the top floor. That's just like, that kind of shows how the game has evolved so much to the point where it's like,
a good example would even be just how you set up a site nowadays. It's a lot more open. It's a lot more open air plans. It started with the aviator wall on Villa, where at first I was full reinforced, and then people started going, hey, we can apply way more pressure to study Balk by opening this up than they can apply to us by being on study Balk. And we can still hold the site with this. And it kind of spiraled from there, where everyone started going, hey, how do we do this with other sites? How do we do this for other maps? And so it's just a much more aggressive, much more proactive way to defend.
Yeah. And I think it's cool to think of like how much the game has evolved, but it's because like the more people play the game and the more the more people get involved and the more the people who are playing continue to play in the pros that we have, everyone's going to get better. Eventually you'll get to a point where, everyone on your team is a certified gunner. And that is where Siege is starting to reach now, where it's just like with a team like W7M, like it's just like, that's the kind of team where everybody on that squad can shoot back really, really well. Yeah. And I feel like it just kind of encapsulates where I think Siege is heading, where it's like, you can do everything perfectly and you still very easily could lose. It's been like that since the start, and I think it's going to get even more and more like that, where, 3 different angles on one roam clear and you have everything else cleared out. He's completely on an island and you still don't manage to kill the guy. I feel like that.
I think it's even crazier, because doesn't he kill the first guy by like unproning and 180ing?
Yeah.
It's like something absurd where it's like, all right, first off, you're getting off the ground, so you have to be un-ADS. And then you're telling me on top of that, you just 180'd my ass and got my friend, and then Nade got some random vertical C4 too. Like this is not okay. All of this happening at once.
It's so and it's just like, to me, that's just where Siege is kind of going in a way, and like how it's always grown, right? You realize like, okay, what we're doing isn't enough, or like what the plan was. Like it's still at the end of the day, people think so much about those kinds of strats and like things like that, when in like one of the most effective strategies to counter overly complex stuff is just find the gap and shoot better. And that's kind of where the meta is heading right now. And that's kind of like the coolest play that I've ever seen that showcases that in sort of a different way, where it's like, yeah, you're going to take 2 whole minutes to clear our roam. In old Siege, he might just sit there and take it at the gain of, wasting 5 or 10 more seconds. But it got to the point where after 20-second meta and all that, people realized like, well, wouldn't it be really good if we could waste all this time and get a kill or two? And then TDM kind of happens because everyone's playing super aggressively. I don't know if that's exactly...
I mean, LMG's helped with that too,
In terms of like how the game evolves, at the end of the day, it'll only evolve as far as like the players are like skill evolves as well. Like it and with certain games, like with like Counter-Strike or Valorant or something like that, like, I mean, Valorant's obviously still definitely growing as well, as their players get better. With Counter-Strike, it's been around so long, and you still have a lot of defaults. You still have a lot of, like, tried-and-true strategies. With Siege, it feels like we keep moving. Even on a map like Oregon or Clubhouse, which have been in their current states for a while, it keeps expanding, like, further and further away from the sites, we make time a few years from now when, like, on Club or Oregon, it's no longer viable to just bunker down in the basement, and people just, like... Suddenly you're like, that's been
an eternal truth since year one. I don't know if the Church Arsenal defense.
I'm just saying it could happen.
Yeah.
I mean, like
you
already see people like starting to get more and more adventurous on those kinds of roams with what security freezer holds on Oregon basement, just poking top of the staircase to shoot some drones and maybe do damage, like stuff like that. We don't know what's going to happen, and at the end of the day, no matter how much everything evolves, it's still just shoot better, win game in theory, right? Like obviously there's a little more to it, but you can look the hardest roam clear in the face and just hop up 180 someone on the unprone and kill another guy outside in garage. and like you're gonna win 10 times out of 10 because you just got like you just owned them.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just so Siege to me. That idea of like we did everything right and we just
Got
lost.
bopped.
And then the
Did
crowd
the,
reaction too and all that just
Did the narrative implications of like W7M being on the comeback and like it was it's the all Brazilian crowd, it's the all Brazilian final. Did any of the narrative implications kind of elevate this in your mind, or is that just
I think
icing on top?
the narrative implications, it is kind of an icing on top, and also the crowd reaction too, kind of like I think really cemented it for me because you can tell how cool of a play it is by how the W7M favored crowd just like absolutely starts losing their minds once he pops up and gets a couple of kills. And like you can't hear Xenox anymore. And like I tried, I've looked through that part of the VOD so many times trying to figure out what he said. There is not a chance. I think almost every other cool moment of that broadcast, I'm able to at least make out what he's saying. I swear I've looked over this play like a dozen times, and I'm just like, no, that one's not, because everyone so instantly was just like losing it completely.
Yeah. Do you have any other plays that you had in mind for this, or like any that you discounted for some reason or another?
I know I was thinking of the iconic play. That's obviously, like that's obvious, but I wasn't there to watch it. And I also like when I watch it back, it's like, it's really cool. It's a nice play, but like, I felt like more of a personal connection to the KZ one. So I chose that.
Yeah.
That was something that was like a uniquely my choice, or maybe not uniquely, but I feel like more people would think of the iconic one than the one that I suggested.
It's
and
definitely
I just liked having that, that's sort of maybe a little personal bias there, but it makes
we
fun.
love personal bias out here.
We love personal bias out here. And so there was that. And like I mentioned, like the Fnatic Hot Reach play, that's really funny. That would have been fun to pick as my uniquely Siege play as well.
Yeah.
And also the Laxing on Tart play, which come to think of it would have been cool because of like, oh, it's a spot you shouldn't have even been, like just lurking.
It's like
But I didn't know. Those also felt like a little bit of personal bias involved in terms of like why I remembered them so well.
Yeah.
So it's like.
I mean, that's kind of like the same thing with me and Mesa J, like Pulse thing. Like, yeah, it redefined how you played Pulse in year one, but like also, does anyone really care nowadays, or like?
You can't go on the tarp anymore.
It's heartbreaking. Ubisoft has removed the one fun feature from a game. I'm never launching this thing again. like no slides even in the map pool anymore. Any closing statements? Anything you want to say before this ends?
I mean, hey, I love analyzing this game as much as the next guy. I love like learning more about certain strats and how they interact with one another and how everything goes. But like at the end of the day, you play it perfectly and you lose a gunfight, you lose another gunfight, and then the round just feels chalked from there. That's just what Siege is. That's what it always has been to me, and that's what it always will be. Because like we can go on for ages and ages about intricacies of strats. Like to me, just since I started playing, the end all be all is just, all right, you did it all right, but if you don't shoot back better than the other guy, you're not like you don't really stand much of a chance at all. And I know that's not the greatest way to look at it, but it's always just been so Siege to me.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of first person shooters are like that too. But I don't know. I just that's just how I've always seen it. So much strategy, so much depth, and it can all be undone just in the flick of a wrist.
All right.